ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। Namaskar, my dear friends. This is video number 7 on Panchadasi of Bharati-tirtha Vidyaranya Swami. This video will start with chapter number 5, Inquiry into the major text Mahavakya Viveka Prakarana. And the first heading, Identity of Self and Brahman. The Mahavakya Viveka is an exposition of the purport of the four Mahavakyas, major text which constitute the quintessence of the Upanishadic teaching. According to Advaita, the principal doctrine of the Upanishad is that of the identity between the. According to Advaita, the principal doctrine of the Upanishads is that of the identity between the Self and Brahman, and this doctrine is enshrined in the heart of each of the four Vedas. If the Vedas be compared to a tree and the Upanishads to its fruit, then the Mahavakyas can be characterized as the juice of the fruit. It is through the hearing of the purport of the Mahavakyas that Brahma knowledge can be gained. The Avantarvakyas, Avantaravakyas or intermediary text give us knowledge of the Saguna Brahma, which is the cause or ground of the world. The Mahavakyas, on the other hand, reveal to us the Nirguna Brahma, which is the same as the Self. Number 2, consciousness is Brahma. The Mahavakyas that form the essence of the Aitreya Upanishad of the Rig Veda is Prajnam Brahman. Consciousness is Brahma. Here the word Prajna indicates the consciousness which is conditioned by the internal organ. It is on the basis of that consciousness that the sense organs function. It is by its power that the sense of sight perceives objects, the sense of hearing hears sounds, the sense of smell perceives odors, the sense of speech performs its function, and the sense of taste discriminates the palatable from the unpalatable. It is the immutable intelligence, Kutastha Chaitanya, which is at the back of all experience. The word Brahma signifies the intelligence which is identical in all beings, the gods, men, animals, and others. The Brahma, this Indra, this Prajapati, all these gods, these five great elements, earth, air, ether, water, fire, and all these small creatures, these others, the seeds of creation, and these egg-born, womb-born, sweat-born, sprout-born horses, cows, men, elephants, and whatever else which breathes and moves and flies and is immovable, all this is guided by intelligence and supported by intelligence. The universe has intelligence for its guide. Intelligence is the basis. Intelligence is the Brahma. It is declared by the Upanishad that the intelligence in all the beings is the same. This intelligence is the self. This intelligence is Brahma, and so the self is Brahma. 3. I am Brahma. The Mahavakya of the Yajurveda, which is found in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, is Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahma. The word Aham implies the self, which is by nature infinite and all pervasive, and which remains as the witnessing principle of the functions of the intellect in all beings, such as man and others. The the meaning of the word Brahma is the same reality which is unconditioned by the empirical categories of space, time, etc. And the verb asmi indicates the relation of identity between the self and Brahma. The self within is the same as the self without. Fourth, that thou art. Tat Tvam Asi. That thou art is the Mahavakya of the Chandogya Upanishad of the Samaveda. This Upanishad declares that prior to creation there was only the Sat, one only without a second. But the creation of which the Upanishad speaks is neither an origination de novo nor an actual transformation. On the contrary, it is only an illusory manifestation, and so on. On inquiry, we find that the Sat is even now the same as it was prior to creation. It is devoid of differences, is non-dual and undivided. What is called modification is but a name. The self neither modifies nor is it modified. It was, is, and will be the same Sat without a second. The word Tat of the Mahavakya implies that Sat, which is the changeless absolute. The implied meaning of the word Tvam is the self which transcends the body, senses, and the mind of the one who hears the Mahavakya. The eligible person who hears the Mahavakya realizes that the self is not the collection of body, sense organs, mind, etc. The self is neither a physical entity nor a psychical phenomenon. It is the intelligence which transcends both body and mind. The verb asi puts the other two words in the relation of opposition and thereby indicates identity between them. The self, which is illusorily seen to be conditioned by body, etc., and Brahma, which is mistakenly thought to produce the universe, etc., are non-different. Fifth, this self is Brahma. The Mahavakya of Atharvaveda, which is declared in the Mandukya Upanishad, is I am Atma Brahma. This self is Brahma. The word I am describes the nature of the self to be self-luminous and immediately cognizable. The self is the locus of the assemblies of factors beginning with egoity and ending with the body. It is the witness intelligence, the inner ruler, immortal. The word Brahma indicates the reality which is the substrate of all things. What we see as the world is the work of Maya. In reality, there is no other entity except Brahma. It is the soul and the whole reality. That Brahma is the self-luminous self. Sixth, identity of implication. All the Mahavakyas declare the same truth, namely the oneness of Dharma and the Self. Each of these sentences has two words, and at the least one of them signifying the individual self and the other the universal reality. The expressed meanings of the words do not convey the doctrine of identity. The individual self, conditioned by the finite intellect and limited by ignorance, cannot be the same as the omniscient and omnipresent Ishvara. But when we take the secondary implications of the words into consideration, we realize that both the words in each of Mahavakyas mean the same reality. When the self and Ishvara are stripped of their extraneous adjuncts Avidya and Maya, they are realized to be identical. This is achieved by exclusive, non-exclusive secondary implication. When the qualities of the Jiva like limited knowledge, etc., and those of Ishvara like omniscience, creatorship, etc., are recognized to be mere superimpositions, then both of them are realized to be identical. The self in truth is not different from Brahma. Chapter number 6. Elucidation in the light of picture analogy. To continue the video number 6, chapter number 6 of the Panchadasi, elucidation in the light of picture analogy. Chitra Dipa Prakarana. First heading, analogy of painting. Employing the analogy of a painted canvas, the Chitra Dipa explains the nature of the Jiva, Kutastha, Ishvara and Brahma. Just as there are four states of a painted canvas, four states are to be discerned of the Supreme Self also. The canvas is first of all bleached, then stiffened with starch, stretched with lines, and finally painted over. Even so, the self has four stages: pure intelligence, Antaryamin, Sutratman, and Virat. In the example, the canvas, which is by nature white, is first bleached, then it is stiffened with starch, sketched with outlines, and filled in with paint. Even so, the self, which is by nature intelligence, becomes Antaryamin when it is associated with Maya, Sutratman when it creates the subtle universe, and Virat when it is the cause of the gross universe. And in the self, all the created beings from Brahma, the highest, down to a blade of grass, are like the painted figures on the canvas. The intelligent beings are analogous to the painted human figure with the paint clothing. The human figures drawn on the canvas appear to be many, each with a clothing which is a painting in a painting. Even so, the intelligent beings like gods and men who are superimposed on the self appear to be manifold, each with a reflection of intelligence. They are not the immutable intelligence because they are subject to transmigration. They are but the shadows of self which is immutable and impartite. To speak of the self as transitory and transmigratory is out of ignorance. It is just like saying that the color of the painted clothing is of the canvas itself. It was stated above that intelligent beings alone possess the reflection of intelligence. The non-intelligent does not manifest the self which is intelligence. The heels and tails painted on the canvas are indeed not endowed with clothing as the human figures are. To think that the transmigratory state of existence is ultimately real is delusion. It is termed avidya, which can be removed by knowledge. Knowledge is the recognition that transmigration belongs to the jiva, who is but a reflection of the self and not to the Atma, which is immutable and eternal. And this knowledge is obtained through inquiry. When the notion of jivahood and the world are sublated through inquiry, the self alone remains as the unsublatable real. By the sublation of the notion of jivahood, etc., their non-apprehension is not meant. What is intended is the determination of their falsity. Otherwise, there is the contingence of release without effort in sleep and swoon. Even by the statement that the self alone remains, what is meant is the determination that the self is real and not the non-recognition of the world. Otherwise, liberation in life would never be possible. Knowledge born of inquiry is twofold, mediate and immediate. When immediate knowledge is obtained, there is an end to inquiry. To know that Brahma is mediate knowledge, and to know that I am Brahma is immediate intuitive experience. Inquiry is the means to intuition. It is through inquiry into the nature of the self that an insight into the real can be gained. Number two, analogy of ether. Intelligence, self can be classified into the immutable, Kutastha, Brahma, Jiva, and the Lord Ishvara. It is analogous to the classification of other ether into pot ether, ether at large, water ether, and cloud ether. The pot ether is the ether conditioned by the pot, and the ether not so conditioned is called the ether at large. The reflection of the cloud cast and starry sky in the water which is in the pot is referred to as the water ether, and the cloud ether is the reflection of ether in the water particles of the cloud region. Through water is not directly seen in the clouds, it is inferred from the fact that clouds are because of rain, and where there is water in the proximity of ether, there must be the reflection of the latter in the former. Like the fourfold classification of ether, the four aspects of intelligence can easily be discerned. The intelligence which is defined by the two bodies, subtle and gross, is called kutastha, immutable, because while being the substance of those bodies, it is immutable like the anvil. The reflection of intelligence in the intelligence which is Superimposed on the immutable is the jiva. The jiva is so called because it is the sustainer of the vital energy. It gets itself involved in misery and metempsychosis. Meeting psychosis. It veils the immutable self even as the water ether hides the entire ether of the pot. This is described in the scriptures by the term reciprocal superimposition. The jiva is superimposed on the kutastha and vice versa. It does not distinguish itself from the kutastha, and this indiscrimination is beginning primal nescience. Nescience is twofold, which projects and that which obscures. The hiding power of nescience is the cause of the statement the kutastha is not manifest, it is non-existent. The non-intelligent person says that he does not know the immutable self. This is the experience of science. He also asserts that the self is not manifest, that it is non-existent. This is due to the veiling power of science. An objection may here be raised: how is it possible that avidya and the self, luminous self, should exist together? Surely darkness and light cannot keep house together. To say that the self-luminous intelligence is veiled by science is a contradiction in terms. The self and avidya are contradictory, and one of the contradictories must be false. If avidya be denied, then there would be no question of existence of its veiling power and the projection of this world of woes. All these being denied, there if avidya be denied, then there would be no question of the existence of its veiling power and the projection of this world of woes. All these being denied, there would be no need for the light of wisdom and consequently released. Doubts such as these are dispelled by the fact of experience. The logic of life is greater than the logic of thought. A thousand arguments cannot transform a pot into a cloth. We experience science and hence it cannot be denied. The self cannot be doubted since it is the very being of him who doubts. When there is no faith in one's own experience, then there would be no ground even for logic. Logic must be grounded in life. Reason must have its basis in experience. To the one who disregards the evidence facts of experience, logic would be of no avail. If logic is required for the sake of intelligibility and clarity of thought, then it must function in accordance with the data of experience. It cannot contradict then. Experience testifies to the fact of avidya and its power to will, and so it must be argued that nescience is not the enemy of the self. If nescience be opposed to the self, how then it is experienced? The real opponent of nescience is discriminative knowledge. It is seen in the case of the enlightened knower that avidya is dispelled by knowledge. Third, kutastha and chidabhasha. Just as silver is superimposed on nacre on the kutastha which is veiled by nescience, there is the superimposition of the reflection of intelligence together with the two bodies. This is the work of the projective power of avidya. This element and existence which are inherent in nacre are observed in silver also. The selfhood and reality which are inherent in the kutastha are seen in the case of projection too. But as the dark exterior and triangularity are hidden, elucidation in the case of Necre by ignorance, even so in Kutastha, its nature as being unattached and blissful is veiled, as in the example, that which is superimposed goes by the name of silver, that which is imposed on the Kutastha is known as I. Just as on seeing this element of nacre, a person thinks that it is silver. Perceiving himself, he thinks that he is I. It may be said that self and I convey the same meaning while this and silver do not, and so the example does not hold good. But this objection is not sound, just as thisness or silverness are different. Selfhood, Sattva and I-ness, ahanta, are also distinct. The one is general and the other is particular. While the general element is common, the particular element is inconstant. Empirical usages like Devdatta himself goes, you yourself see, I myself am not able, testify to the fact that selfhood is the element which is common. In this silver, this is cloth, this is the general element. So also self underlies all observations with regard to he, you, or I. Let selfhood be distinct from I-ness. What has this to do with Kutastha? If this objection be raised, we reply the meaning of the word self is the Kutastha. If it be said that selfhood is that which prevents otherness, then to us who maintain that the Kutastha is the self, its prevention of an other is the contingence of the acceptable. The words Swayam and Atma have the same connotation. They are synonymous with no difference in meaning. Therefore, both of them are not found together in empirical uses. Both Svatva and Atamtva exclude an other. If it be said that Swam and Atma cannot convey the same connotation, since it is seen that Swam is used even with regard to inert objects like pot, etc., as in the pot itself does not know, then we say that such usage is no contradiction, because there is the existence of the self even in pot, etc. Swam is used even in the respect of them. If there be the self in the sentient and the non-sentient alike, why should there be the difference between them at all? If thus it be asked, our reply is that the difference is due to the existence or the non-existence of the reflection of intelligence. The Kutastha is ever and everywhere present, and the distinction between the inert and the sentient is not its work. The difference is the creation of the reflection of intelligence which has the intellect for its locus. Just as the intelligent is a superimposition on the Kutastha, The non-intelligent too is a delusive appearance in the same. Selfhood, Sattva, is not the only commitment of I, you, etc. Thatness and thisness are also observed to accompany them everywhere, and so they too cannot atamtva. If thus it be said, we reply it is not so. Thatness and thisness accompany atamtva. Also, hence, it is not possible that they should themselves constitute atamtva. Thatness and the thisness, selfhood and otherness, I and you are reciprocal counter entities. The self which is not the other must be understood as the Kutastha. The I, which is the counter entity of you, is superimposed on the self. Though the self and I are distinct like this and silver, those who are deluded perceive identity between them. The superimposition of identity is the product of avidya. And when avidya is discarded through knowledge, its effect delusion is also destroyed. Now, it may be objected that the effects of avidya are not removed even when there is the dawn of knowledge, for in the case of him who has realized the identity of the self and Brahma, there is not seen invariably the destruction of his body. Obscuration and identity, which are the products of avidya, we reply, are removed by knowledge alone, but projection depends on the karma which has already begun to take effect. It is only when the momentum has spent itself that projection can be destroyed. Nor is it a contradiction to say that the effect remains for a while, even after the removal of the cause. Logicians, Nyayikas say that even after the destruction of the cause, the product remains for a moment, and this is quite possible. According to the Vedantin also, the logicians Nyayikas assert the existence of the product only for a moment after the destruction of the cause. But this assertion is in respect of things like thread, etc., whose existence can be measured in terms of a few days. In the case of the delusion, however, which cannot be measured in terms of time by moment, we must understand a suitable length of time, just as the potter's wheel revolves even after the potter stops propelling it and desists from doing so only when the momentum that he has given it is fully spent. So also the projections of avidya continue to exist so long as the prarabdha is unspent, while the assumption of the logician is without any sound evidence. Ours is not so. The Vedantic view is supported by scripture, logic, and experience. Fourth, the nature of self. Now it has been established that the identity between the Kutastha and the Chidabhasa, the immutable self, and the changing I is a product of new science. The men of the world and logicians alike are deluded because they disregard the declaration of scripture and cling obstinately to their rational powers alone. Even some of those who have studied scripture are not able to overcome this delusion because they study scripture to support their own preconceived notions and not to understand the purport of the Shastra. They pick up a word here and a word there and distort the intention of the sacred teaching. The Lokayata Those who follow them uncritically declare that the self is the assemblage of factors beginning with the kutastha and ending with the physical body. They reach this conclusion through the only means of valid knowledge. They recognize that is perception. To make their theory appear plausible, they cite also the scriptural passages where the doctrine that the self is the seat of food is declared and where the episode of Virochana is related. Some of the Lokayatas are dissatisfied with this view. The physical outfit cannot be the self. For when the jiva deserts it, it is observed to perish. Hence, the self must be different from the flesh and bones. The senses which are different from the physical body constitute the self. This is evident from such worldly usages as I hear, I speak, etc. It cannot be said that the senses are non-intelligent and hence cannot constitute the self. In scripture we read of the dispute of the senses. If the senses were non-intelligent, surely they could not dispute. The worshipper of Hiranyagarbha, however, say this: even though the sense of sight, etc., may perish, the jiva survives, but he dies when the vital airs desert him. Therefore, prana is the self and not the senses. There is also the scriptural declaration that while the senses go to sleep, the prana is wide awake, and the seat made of prana is very well described in scripture. The passages that could be cited are: in the sight of this body, the pranas are awake, the senses during sleep dissolve in prana and arise from it to wakefulness. Hence, it is great. The other inner self is made of prana. The Upaskas, followers of the Narada Panchartara system, think that mind or manas is the self. The prana is not the enjoyer while the manas is. It is declared in scripture that mind alone is the cause of the bondage and release of man. That there is other inner self of the nature of mind, therefore mind is the self. The Vijnanavadin hold that momentary consciousness is the self. It is patent that the Vijnana is the root of the mind and the international organ is twofold of the mode I and of the mode this. The former is Vijnana while the latter is Manas. The notion of I is the ground of the notion of this. Without the notion of I, the notion of this is not produced. Manas is grounded in Vijnana. Since Vijnana is cognized to be produced and destroyed every moment, it is momentary, changing, and since it is its own evidence, it is self-luminous. The Agamas declare that this jiva is the seat of Vijnana and that the entire samsara, including origination, destruction, pleasure, etc., belongs to it. The Madhyamikas assert that Vijnana, which is momentary and evanescent like the lightning, cannot be the self, since nothing else is left and the self is Sunya, nullify. It is the night of nothingness, an abysmal void. There is the authority of scripture which says that this world was non-existent in the beginning. The entire universe is a myth and a fancy. It is a fabrication in nothing, a misreading of the real, that is Sunya. There can be no delusion without a locus. Nothing can come out of nothing. Hence, the self, which is the witness of even nothing, must be admitted to be existent. Otherwise, there cannot even be a talk about nothing. So, the logicians Prabhakaras and Bhattas hold that the final doctrine of the Veda is that there is the Ananda Maya, which is more fundamental than the sheath of Vijnana, and that it is the self. There is dispute also with regard to the size of the self. Is the self atomic, or is it infinite in size, or is it of medium size? Disputants support one or the other of these views and cite as their evidence scripture and logic. Antra, the Antralas assert that the self is atomic since it runs even in the subtlest of veins. The scriptures declare that the self is smaller than the atom, greater than the greatest. This atomic self is to be known by the mind. It is subtler than the subtlest eternal. Other passages there are which say the jiva is to be understood as a hundredth of 100th part of the end of a hair. The jnanas argued that the self is of medium size since intelligence is observed to pervade the whole body from head to foot. The scriptural evidence is the passage that self entered the body unto the very ends of the nails. As for what was said that the self runs in the veins, it should be understood in a figurative sense. It is only a portion of the self that enters the veins. The same self is able to occupy different bodies of different sizes. This is possible because the limbs of the self grow and decay. So the jnanas hold that the self is of the size of the body and assume the shape of the body which it inhabits. If the self be of the size of the body, it cannot be eternal. It must be subject to decay and destruction. If it be composed of parts like pot, etc., it must perish. Then there would be the defects caused by the destruction of the acts done without yielding their effects and occurrence of the fruits of those which are not done. Therefore, the self is all pervasive. It is neither atomic nor of medium size. Like ether, it is all penetrating and partless. There is dispute also with regard to the nature of the self. Is it intelligence or non-intelligence, or intelligence come non-intelligence? The followers of the Prabhakara and the logicians regard the self as non-intelligent. Like ether, the self is the substrate of qualities and its quality is intelligence. The substance and quality are not identical. Hence, the self cannot be the same as intelligence. Intelligence is not the only quality of the self. There are other attributes like desire, aversion, effort, virtue, vice, pleasure, pain, and their residual impressions, etc. The qualities are not inherent in the self. The self comes into contact with the mind owing to its adrishta in the form of acts which have begun to bear fruit, and from this conjunction arise the attributes. When during sleep the adrishta is destroyed, the attributes also leave the self. The self is called intelligent because it possesses intelligence, desire, aversion, and effort. It is different from the Lord since it is the agent of vice and virtue and the enjoyer of pain, pleasure, etc. If it be asked how the self, which is all pervasive, could go to the other world and return to this world, The Prabhakaras and logicians reply that the going and coming of the self are to be taken in a figurative sense, as the self is believed to move about in this world because it is endowed with a body, so also in the other world its movement is intelligible since it is equipped with a body suitable for the enjoyment of the fruit of its deeds. As here in this world, pleasure etc. are products of karma, so in the other world, desire etc. are produced in the heavenly body by the deeds of the self. Thus, movement is intelligible in the case of the all-pervasive self. The evidence for this is the entire section of the Veda dealing with works. The real nature of the self is non-intelligence. It is the Anandmaya seat which remains over in sleep. The following of Bhatta hold that the Anandmaya, which is the self, is not mere non-intelligence, but it is intelligence come non-intelligence. Though consciousness is not manifest, yet it is inherent in the self even during sleep. If intelligence were absent from sleep, then for one who wakes up from sleep, memory would be unintelligible. The memory in sleep, I was unconscious, can arise only from the experience of unconsciousness in sleep. It is declared in scripture that in sleep there is no loss of the seer and the sight. Hence, like the glowworm, the self is a composite of light and darkness, intelligence and inertness. The self, which is without parts, cannot be composite entity. Therefore, the Sankhyas assert that the self is intelligence. A double nature is unintelligible in the case of the homogeneous self. That the self is non-intelligent was refuted in criticizing the view of the Prabhakaras and the logicians. So, by elimination, the Sankhya say that the self is intelligence, the element of inertness belonging to the nature of Prakriti, which is a string of three strands. Goodness, activity, and inertness are its constituents. It creates the whole universe for the sake of bondage and the release of the intelligent self. Purusha, though by itself inactive, is lured by the activity of Prakriti. Bondage and release do not really belong to the self. They are due to the want of discrimination between the intelligent Purusha and the non-intelligent Prakriti. In order to account for the distinctness of bondage and release, the Sankhyas admit of a plurality of Purushas. So long as Purusha is ignorant of its real nature, it plays into the hands of Prakriti. It identifies itself with Prakriti and its products and tastes the sweetness and bitters of life. But when it realizes its true nature, it is released from bondage. The Smritis declare that Prakriti is the previous of creation. It is termed avyakta, the unmanifest. It is also evident that the self is unattached, that it is devoid of modifications which have their source in Prakriti. The products of Prakriti are due to the latter's proximity to Purusha. Just as iron filings move in the proximity of a magnet, Prakriti begins to be active in creating this world in the proximity of Purusha. But the following of the yoga system think that it is God who directs the course of Prakriti. The God of yoga is only a primus inter pairs. He is a Purusha Visesa, a superior Purusha. The testimony for the assumption of a god as separate from Prakriti and Purusha is the passage which says that he is other than the Jivas. He is the Lord of Prakriti and Purusha. He is the Lord of all attributes, the Vrindarna Brihadaranyaka Upanishad describe the inner ruler in detail. So I end the video here, and the next video number, that is next video number 6 will start. We'll start with page number 58, heading 5, Nature of God. So thank you for watching this video. Please like, comment and share the video and subscribe the channel. Thanks a lot. Namaskar my dear friends. Namaskar.